I proudly said I'm Hindu during a cultural day presentation. Instead of curiosity, I was met with laughter. Classmates joked about cows and mocked our beliefs. Later in high school, when discussing religion, I was asked about my caste, not with curiosity, but with judgment. People made assumptions and reduced me to stereotypes. They asked me if my family in India oppresses women. And it was just me. My friends faced the same things. Some were bullied for posting about Hindu festivals or mandir visits. One friend of mine shared a post about attacks on temples in Mississauga last year, and her peers turned on her and called her an oppressor. Many Hindu youth now feel scared to express pride in their identity. Some even hide it, say things like, I'm not religious or I'm an atheist, just to not feel targeted. When schools stay silent about this discrimination, it sends the message that our pain doesn't matter. The silence can break a student's confidence and connection to their roots. I've seen Hindu youth lose touch with their faith and in the emptiness drift towards crowds and habits that they don't serve them. I was almost one of them.
A friend of mine, a young Hindu woman of Indo-Caribbean heritage, once challenged her university professor for describing Hinduism as a politically aligned ideology. She respectfully explained that Hinduism is a global spiritual tradition practiced by millions outside of India and cannot be reduced to one nation's political agendas. The professor only replied saying, well, I've been teaching longer than you've been alive. Assuming her background, she tried to understand her and said that I understand that you're Indian and you would feel that way, but she was born to Indo-Caribbean parents. That nuance didn't matter to the professor. Her lived experience was dismissed and her identity was misread. So that exchange captures the quiet imbalance. So many students, they face expertise without empathy. And when that happens, students like myself withdraw. When someone's cultures or beliefs are repeatedly misrepresented, leading to anxiety and social withdrawal.
Thank you for coming. Have you talked to your professors or have you talked to fellow students to get a club together and make the same presentation to the professors?
The students who have confided in me have spoken to their professors as well. There are professors who empathize with us, but there are others who do dismiss that and they don't understand that there is nuance and they sort of lack the objectivity to realize that Hinduism shouldn't be grouped together with one country's.
No, I understand that. I'm just wondering if you've made any headway pulling students together, forming a club, and then dealing with the professors, because we can't really tell them what to do from here.
Right. No, I understand that. We have. My friend who is from another local university has done that with her other friends, and I'm a recent graduate. And when I was on campus, we did come together and under our organization, which is called the Brock BIPOC Caucus, we have talked about how we should approach these types of professors and how we can best objectively explain ourselves.
And do you mind my asking what university you went to?
I went to Brock.
Brock? Okay, thank you.
Social media blatantly promotes and inflames anti-Hindu hatred, and my own experiences as a content creator bear this out. There have been innumerable instances where I've posted something innocuous discussing Hindu thought, culture, or philosophy, only to be met with virulent, caustic bitterness, attacking me simply for my Hinduness. I've spoken to many young Hindu Canadians, including residents of our city, Mississauga, and they have admitted to me that they self-censor and deny themselves the freedom to exist openly in spaces both online and offline as a result of the hatred which they face, whose normalization they have become witnesses to. On this slide, you can see some of the prejudiced and hateful comments that I have received on my videos.
This is a visual, a vandalized poster from Toronto's first ever Hindu art exhibition hosted by the Hindu students at OCAD University. Every single poster the night before the event was defaced. This is how threatening Hindu art and expression are to some people. The Hindu students at University of Toronto and OCAD hosted a smaller version of Toronto's 50-year-old annual Chariot Festival, and a petition was circulated by a group of academics at University of Toronto, signed by nearly 150 academics across Canada, most of them based in Ontario. It condemned the Hindu student participation and called for the event's cancellation, labeling the event as extremist and hateful. This isn't subtle, and this clearly should not be dismissed as freedom of expression. This is organized and institutional anti-Hindu hate embedded within academia itself. So what does this mean for Hindu youth? It means that as long as we sit and dance, we're okay, but at the moment we speak up, we're extremists. The moment we challenge falsehoods in classrooms, express pride in our beliefs, the system will push back. In school, mocking Hindu traditions is seen as normal, and in university, raising valid concerns of Hindu students is seen as political propaganda. I've experienced this firsthand. As a Hindu student at OCAD, I was called a violent extremist in front of a class of 60 students for writing a paper on the tokenization of yoga in the West. When Hindu students at OCAD University began documented incidents of anti-Hindu hate, we received over 40 reports within a single weekend, or just from the past 2 years. These were submitted to the OCAD University Senate as a part of our call to recognize anti-Hindu hate within the university's policies. And one of these incidents, the vandalized posters, are actually confirmed as a hate incident by the Toronto Police. And yet, with that confirmation, our motion to recognize anti-Hindu hate was vetoed in March 2025 and postponed until 2027. Hindu students were not even allowed in the meeting, and no explanation was ever provided. When the youth requested a small temple space within campus's multi-faith center, many groups on campus said they will not share a space with idol worshippers. This isn't isolated. Across many universities, Hindu students are being denied equal opportunities to form clubs, access funding, and use spaces freely available to other student groups. A lot of the times, Hindu youth, before they understand who we are, we're told what we're not allowed to be. So a lot of Hindu youth tend to just assimilate, renounce, and disappear because that's what the system demands of them.
What I'm having trouble understanding is every one of the presentations is to do with universities, and I'm writing down the ones that you're talking about. You really should be talking to the universities. Are you experiencing this out in the work world or in everyday life?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think a lot of the times when universities went to the DEI department at my university, and they dismissed being called a violent extremist in front of a class, they dismissed it under freedom of expression. The governments are willing to recognize anti-Hindu hate. I'm afraid there's a lack of accountability. A lot of the times, a lot of these issues get brushed under the rug that, oh, this is political discourse. However, my question to the council would be that if it were for any other faith, would it be acceptable? Right? If a member of any other faith were called a violent extremist for just saying a very Canadian issue, the tokenization of Hindu or the Hindu practices or yoga in the West is a very, and I was looking at a very Toronto perspective of that as well, looking at the local yoga studios in Toronto, right? And if that were to happen to any other member of any other faith, would be a bigger issue than it is. Why we're coming here is once our governments start recognizing this, it becomes a lot less normalized to call a young Hindu student, oh, what's your caste? Like being in high school here, right? Like anytime you bring up the idea of being Hindu, you get, oh, you guys worship cows. Does your family drink cow urine? Why is my faith is not a joke. It's my identity. And what happens that this is not an issue that's limited to campuses. It's happening in parks. A lot of the time kids are like, we're not gonna play with you because you're Hindu. Little kids. And imagine that kind of impact on a little kid's mind, right? So I think city recognizing this formally brings forth the awareness in the larger community. And Mississauga can really set that precedent. A lot of not only cities, but also school boards, a lot of universities.
Okay, thank you. Mississauga doesn't tolerate in any policy, in any way, what you're describing.
Thank you.
And once we pull out one group, I'm sure we'll have a dozen groups coming, but your problem seems to be starting in the school system. You're talking about elementary schools, which we have school boards you can delegate and have them listen, and you have your university campuses where you should be delegating as well. So just finding this is very education focused and seems to be where the real root of the problem is. But happy to have you here, happy to have you speak. Councillor DeMerlo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Kusha, you speak, you're young, you just graduated, so you're speaking about your experience of discrimination as a Hindu in universities and schools because you're young people. And so I think that there's a lot of merit to the experiences you're sharing. And one of the things when we spoke many months ago when you first came, it actually brought tears to my eyes. One of the things that I recall you said was a lot of your teachers said, we know, and I'm paraphrasing, that what we are saying isn't fair, but there's pressure on us to do this. So there's this systemic to demean the faith because that's just sort of part of guess, ecosystem. And so I guess what you're asking is if somebody can name this, it starts to have show leadership, it starts to have cascade into other areas where people go, wait a minute, now this issue is being named. Maybe you can just speak to that whole climate that you experienced, because the question has been, well, why haven't you just gone to your academic superiors and reported about it? Perhaps you can talk about what happened when you tried to do that.
I think when our posters were vandalized, that's a very good example of, went to a lot of academics around the university, a lot of Hindu academics around the university. All of them sympathized with the cause, but they said if we choose to speak up, we lose our tenureship, or we're gonna have troubles getting published. So the issue is unfortunately in the system. A lot of, you Google, for example, Hindu identity on Google Scholar, the first 10 results are negative. The first page is filled with misinformation and hatred towards the faith. And when that sort of narrative, it's the dominant narrative, you see that on social media. Right? A lot of my friends are content creators, and even if they're like playing an instrument or they're being very, they're just existing, there's a lot of hate that comes on their comment section. So the issue is that no one has recognized it. There's not a name to this problem. A lot of the times it's like, oh, it's a geopolitical issue. And I actually faced this issue when I went to police to report this issue. They lacked the framework. They lack the nuance. They're like, oh, well, I don't know if this is considered political. I'm like, why is it considered political hate? Right? This incident happened to Hindu students of a thing that's very Hindu, and it says no Hindu nationalism or no Hindu extremism in Canada. Is me showcasing Hindu art, is that extremism? And I made this question, and that's why they ended up recognizing as a Hindu hate incident. So the problem is that we are lacking a word or a proper term for this problem. And lacking of that proper term means that there's no accountability for when anti-Hindu hate does occur, be it on an elementary school playground or in high schools or in universities or in offices, right? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of Hindus, because of the ecosystem being like this, a lot of Hindus are also self-censored, right? Like majority of Hindus are immigrants from India. They're very good citizens, they're very law-abiding citizens. And as soon as someone calls them whatever, you're XYZ, or you're an extremist, or this, they tend to self-censor, and they will not report it. And I've had that issue with my parents as well, failing to be able to speak up. So if the city will recognize the term anti-Hindu hate formally, that allows for us to it's a start of a very long journey.
Well, thank you very much. You've had lots of opportunity to speak. I'm going to ask Graham, the anti-hate policies are in our city and in our country, and do they include everyone?
Through you, Madam Mayor, broad question, but I'll try to answer succinctly. As you mentioned before, the city has many policies out and prohibit hate and discrimination in any form. In accordance with the Human Rights Code for Ontario, which prohibits discrimination based on race, religion, or ethnic origin, and a number of other enumerated categories, very broadly defined. There are principles that the city lives by and staff by on a daily basis. All of our policies are evaluated from a perspective that they do not conflict with the applicable human rights legislation or the values of the city that include diversity, anti-hate.
Madam Mayor, I want to start with this notion about the academic Hinduphobia. I know it sounds strange why we are talking about it, but we need to understand that is the beginning, that's where it starts. The term Hinduphobia itself was first used in middle of the 18th century when academics critiqued the colonial book called The History of British India. And that book was less about history and academia and more about controlling the civilization and the people of India. That is the origin of Hinduphobia, anti-Hindu hate. But the unfortunate part is, on that time, many scholars like that, Catherine Mayo's book, Mother India, and Miles' book about the land of Lingam. So pathologization of this culture, pathologization of the deities, and the faith itself started from that. But unfortunately, even now, those are the foundational studies for the Indology and South Asian Studies Department. And your request to make the Hindu student councils and the clubs are valid responses to that. But the problem is not contained to that when this hate actually goes out of the classrooms. And you see the example of that, what so eloquently Khushi, Sanidhi, and Divyanshu, and all Rishi so eloquently, so passionately, emotionally expressed that is affecting their psychology, their social life going forward. And for 7 young folks who were presented here, behind them there are hundreds more who are experiencing the same thing. So it is part of their lives now. They are Mississauga residents and their lives are getting affected because of this. Their confidences are getting affected because of this. These biases when travel to newsrooms and public policies, that is when this hate starts to reflect in its true, very ugly form. A lot of people talk about anti-Hindu hate reflects into the vandalism of the temples and dismissing them as anti-India sentiment only or political, as if like anything political is wrong or should not be addressed for some reason. So the bias, how it is spilled in the media, like Khushi just explained, if you look up any of the academic articles, the same exercises can be done about all the national media houses in Canada, from CBC to Global News to CTV, whoever, that you can look for the terminologies about Hindu lives, just keyword of Hindu, and you will see how many negative reports are about Hindus or about India for some reason, and just culture overall. Positive will be very token when there are cultural celebratory like Bollywood and the dance and food only. So it is unfair that when a synagogue is vandalized, it is called anti-Semitism, and rightly so. If mosque is attacked, that is Islamophobia. But when a Hindu temple is defaced, it always from the media houses is reframed as anti-India and political and clash between groups also sometimes. But online, this hate takes a very, very different and very dehumanizing, very toxic and very ugly form. The slurs like Pajit, and there is an obsessive attempt to somehow relate Hindus with the excreta for some reason by a lot of trolls. So what is happening is that police reported hate crimes against South Asians in Canada have risen 227% in the last 4 years. Online posts containing anti-South Asian slurs have surged over 1,300% in a single year. Islamists, white nationalists, Khalistanis, and other extremist networks online have been consistently using genocidal memes, tropes, and code words to spread anti-Hindu hate. In 2022 study by National Network Contagion Research Institute warned that such online hate would eventually lead to real-world violence. And they were right. This hate has a body count now, and a price is being paid in the form of the fear. In the past 4 years, over 30 Hindu temples across Canada have been vandalized. Even Mahatma Gandhi statues, one of the most visible symbol of the Hindu life, have been defaced. And in one instance in the British Columbia, a bronze statue of Mahatma Gandhi was beheaded. Imagine the efforts needed to do that. Khalistani protests also, they say that they are political in the nature, but they use deliberate and persistent use of Hindu-specific imagery, tropes, sacred symbols, practices, and livelihood. I just wanted to end with this, that the deep-ed wounds are not always visible. They are psychological and social wounds. And when crime there has no name, it is easy to brush under the carpet. The council can take this step to formally recognize anti-Hindu hate, and it helps solve 3 critical problems. Number 1, it gives Hindu residents of Mississauga public assurance that our city truly stands for us. It gives law enforcement the framework to understand and identify this category of hate, and it allows victims to report without having to educate officials what they are feeling about. So no community's pain should be invisible, Madam Mayor and councillors. This should be your legacy, and I will encourage you and request you, please, to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation and an excellent summary of what the students presented to us. Thank you very much. Councillor Demerla.
Thank you. I just want to begin by thanking all the deputants. I just want to begin by saying that as a council, we have recognized individually anti-Semitism, and we have recognized Islamophobia. So, we are not trying to do anything precedent-setting here. As a Hindu myself, I can tell you that over the last 2 to 3 years, things have changed. It's very different, and you can feel the difference. I don't want to go into the roots of it, but what I do feel is when you name something and you shame something, people are less likely to do it. And the challenge right now is that we're in an ecosphere where it's not named. It's just not an idea. Everybody knows that there's anti-Semitic hate, and everybody knows that there's Islamophobia, and there is. But there is a lot of systemic anti-Hindu hate, and it's normalized because it's not called out. So that's what this motion is about. In fact, I believe in the United States, a number of legislatures over there, or I think they're called assemblies over there, have already called out anti-Hindu hate formally, including California, which is a big one. And in Canada, a number of municipalities, including one very recently, was it Wainwright, I think, in Alberta, that has formally recognized anti-Hindu hate. I also want to thank Councillor Hornick for so readily agreeing to second this. And I just want to remind Council of a very live incident of anti-Hindu hate that took place, because Onkar, you may recall, had come and delegated here, Onkar Deshpande, to talk about his experience with there was this very ugly graffiti, Indian rats or something, and then he had come forward to delegate against it, and the 905 Hub picked it up, and you have to see the amount of hate directed even at Councillor Hornick, unfortunately, because he spoke up, because we said that it was wrong to have that. So we have a live case right here in Mississauga that somebody delegated here, shining a light on the issue, and then there was a lot of hate for having the temerity to shine a light on it, and both Councillor Hornick and I got a lot of flack online for saying this was wrong. So this is just a live example of how rampant this is. So I'm not going to say anything more other than I hope Council will consider supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hornick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think Councillor DeMillo did a good job acknowledging a lot of the things I was going to say as well. To Councillor DeMillo's point, we have recognized a number of other types of hate in our community, and I know that this council stands united in being against that. And we do that, and our Solicitor Graham did run through the number of things that guide our principles at this city, and we know that we're doing that work through our different committees, through our just general work. But it never hurts to call things out and name things as they are. I guess the one thing I would say is, as Councillor DeMirla said, response to Onkar was just really glad Onkar came to council today to raise this. We don't accept hate in our city, and we act quickly when graffiti of hateful nature happens. If people see shameful incidents like this in the future, call 311 or speak to your local councillor. We're here to call for a better city. And there were 71 replies that are just disgusting. I wouldn't repeat that language at council. And this is a secondary reply to somebody. It just speaks to the fact about how quick people are out there right now to be so nasty to each other, right? And whether it's Hinduphobia, whether it's Islamophobia, I think it's just good for us to recognize that the people in our communities feel affected by this, and they feel acknowledged by council saying that that's not acceptable in our city. And I know council has always had a long-standing policy of that, and it's just an affirmation. It's symbolic because we're already doing this work, but symbols matter. So I'm thankful that it's been brought forward, and happy to support that today.
Councillor DeMirla.
Sorry to get back on the board a second time. I just forgot to acknowledge somebody, and her name is Ragini Sharma. She had come here 2 years ago requesting that council recognize anti-Hindu hate, and so she really started that process. So this is something that's been in the background for a while. At that time, we had just received the delegation, but I did promise her that I would acknowledge the fact that she had also requested this. So thank you, Ragini, for being part of this.
Okay, before I read the motion out, so everybody's clear what we're voting on, I would like to add to it that we send a letter to the University of Toronto at Arundel and tell them that this is what we've done today, if in fact it passes, which I'm sure it will, and make sure that the students' concerns there are being addressed. And I will personally talk to the principal at UTM, where I think Matt's got a very good working relationship with her. Maybe we should have her for tea and have a little chat with her, but I'd like to add a letter to that and all the other universities that you mentioned. One of my kids went to York. I'm surprised at Brock, so I think we should be sending letters to all the universities that you represented today, so make sure, I'll get those from Councillor DeMirla. Okay, the motion is, oh, Councillor Reid, yes, sorry.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I just noticed in the motion that it highlights the trustees. Can we get those letters to the directors of education? The trustees at the Catholic Board are actually not functioning as the mandate from the province.
Yes, absolutely. I think we should probably paper everybody with these. We will come up with that, and I think Rob Tawartha can probably include this in his next committee meeting. Make sure we address it directly. Okay, moved by Councillor DeMirla, seconded by Councillor Joe Hornick. Motion recognizing anti-Hindu hate in Mississauga. Whereas Mississauga is home to one of Canada's largest Hindu communities, and whereas incidents of anti-Hindu hate have been reported across Canada and more specifically in Mississauga, which shocks me, including but not limited to vandalism of temples in Mississauga, targeting targeted misinformation and online harassment about local Hindu events and harassment of Hindu students in local schools and colleges, creating anxiety and fear among Hindu residents. Whereas hate in any form, including anti-Hindu hate, strikes at the heart of who we are as Canadians and undermines people's sense of belonging. And whereas Mississauga City Council has consistently taken a stand against racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all forms of hate and discrimination, it's equally important to recognize and denounce anti-Hindu hate. Therefore, be it resolved that 1. Mississauga City Council formally condemns anti-Hindu hate in all its forms, including verbal, physical, digital, or institutional acts of discrimination directed at Hindu individuals, organizations, or places of worship. 2, Council reaffirms its commitment to protecting freedom of religion and belief for all residents, which is the point I was getting at with Graham, as guaranteed under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. 3, city staff be directed to work with Peel Regional Police, the city's Combating Racism, Discrimination and Hatred Advisory Committee, as well as and interfaith organizations to develop outreach and educational initiatives aimed at countering anti-Hindu hate and promoting mutual understanding. 4th, that a copy of this resolution be shared with the Mississauga's members of Parliament, members of Provincial Parliament, Peel District School Board trustees, Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board trustees, local Hindu community organizations to affirm Council support for safe, inclusive, and respectful Mississauga for all. And I'm adding 5 to notify all the universities that we've heard from today as part of that. I'll call the vote. The chair doesn't normally vote, but I broke the rule today. Thank you very much for your delegations. Thank you. It passes unanimously.